So here we are again, episode 5, the way Al does it. It might look like I've gotten the cart before the horse here because those of you who've done this before are going to realize that I've gone ahead and ordered up a reamer before I've even action proved this thing. So I did a ritual, a beginning action proving, and I did some research and I found that others are doing what I'm doing. So with that in mind, I'm gonna go ahead and proceed forward here. Remember, I've told you from the start that the decisions I make are the decisions that I make, and we are following through, warts, feathers, and all. When I screw up, you're going to see my screw up. And there's a chance of a screw up here because I made my measurements, I made my dummy rounds, I made up enough information to get this reamer on track and ordered. Thank you very much. And the biggest thing, the decision that I made was that I set the free bore at almost 200 thousandths for these enormous big bullets. Now the reason that's relevant is because I could get this whole thing built and find out that the magazine that I've chosen doesn't feed correctly. Because I'm just now doing something called mocking that up. So I'm going to go with you, I'm going to take you with me through the mock-up process so that you can see what maybe you'll see what my risks are and what it is exactly that I'm talking about. Because this whole from the off the cuff, from the start thing can be frustrating. I've done it enough that I'm taking some calculated leaps here in hopes of not screwing up too bad. I take a lot of notes, as I've said. This is my build notebook just for this gun, where I go through from step 1, dated by day. And right now I'm going to go over to my measured max COAL, which is cartridge overall length. Now, this is another of those things you're going to see rooted about on YouTube as though it's meaningful. Some dork will come on and say, I hate it when people misspell words, and I hate it when people use incorrect terminology, and I hate it. There's a lot of hate in this world from people that should know better, but they're just too stupid to. So, call it COL, call it COAL, call it stuff it in your ear. I really don't care. We are designating this as cartridge or case overall length. And we've made up a max COAL using this 245 grain hunting bullet, the one that we've chosen. So we start with this. That's got us up to where we can design and spec out our dummy cartridge. Now, we paid $4 a piece for only 4 of these little bullets. I'm not going to bang them up by using them for action-proving dummies. That's what we called them when we were in gunsmithing school. You can call them whatever you want. Fit and function. So what we've done instead is we've taken a commonly available bullet, a 250 grain bullet here, and we've made a dummy that's the same length as this dummy. But first, before we get there, we got to show you how we dummy this thing up so that we can use it. Because I'm going to dummy the action up without going through all the fittage into the stock at this point. So we start by measuring up the stock. We take this stock, and I did it a little differently than this, but essentially we run a number in here. Zoop. This is the height of this rear aluminum bedding, and some would call it a pillar, but it's simply not a pillar. It is a bedding block. And the number we ended up with here is 1.2855 is the separation distance that we want from action to bedding surface. Now, we've already measured the front, and I've already got a pillar made up for it. This pillar will never be used in the build. This is here only to provide a mock-up situation. So, I now take my rear quasi-pillar, and I stack some washers on it. Now, during the build, I've got this written down elsewhere, but I write down 1.285 rear pillar. I've got enough room in this book to do this build if I do a few excess notes. I just don't want to bring out all my other building notes. So, what we have done so far is we have set up an action dummy for, this happens to be a Weatherby mag. This happens to be a Stolly Atlas from Kelbley's with the appropriate size bolt face. And I've shown you in prior videos how we fitted this so that it fits into this mag. And this particular action seems to be cut for this long. The front feed works, the rear feed works. This thing is sitting in here nicely. And understand, during this build process, I may go back and reiterate certain things. It might be that 2 of these videos are going to talk about kind of the same thing as I work my way through this mess. But suffice it to say that the target we want right here is 1.285. When we throw our caliper on here and we see 1.239, well, that's not going to work. So, based on my vast experience with these washers, I figure one more washer ought to about do it. And no, I lied. I'm a lying sack. 1.280, which is close enough for what we're doing. I could get it, well, depending on where I go on here. These washers aren't perfect. I got it to squeeze all the way down to 1.2795. So it could be 3 or 4 thou under. I could go through and take another washer if I were so inclined. 1.283, we'll go ahead and use this washer. So now we take this and we put it on this rear pillar that I've made up. I might check again just to make sure there was no washer already on there from before, because these fits are pretty tight and I've had this on and off a time or two. I don't go do this live on video. Yep, no, we're good. I instead mock this all up first, then take it back apart, and then I come and show you so that it's a little bit quicker. Now we can take this, which happens to be Cherry Hill bottom metal that we've chosen, and we can run it down. And we find out that we can't get it to bottom out because the magazine is in the way. This happens to be a Weatherby magazine. I called Weatherby and ordered up 10 of them because they're a good, useful, all-around magazine. And I'll show you why that is. But I wanted to show you, first of all, what we're doing here. We find out that when this is mocked up, I'm going to check this and make sure that I got something that you can see here. Boy, that's close. Suffice it to say that this is gapped pretty dramatically. This shape of this magazine doesn't in any way match my mock-up. When I get everything, it's going to sit something like that, and it's going to be gapped something like that. But this is a matter of taking somebody else's magazine, Weatherby makes some wicked long magazines. But the reason I want this is the latest generation of the Weatherby mag, and it's got a few points that I really like. It's got an adjustable tab here in the back. It's got various surfaces here which will get hacked off so that we can get this to drop down into this Cherry Hill bottom metal. But most importantly, it's got this beautiful set of fully adjustable feed lips. This is a huge detail when you're coming up with something new. For instance, we've got a crying need for good magazines right now because we got 2 bottom metal scenarios existent in the world. We've got the bolt in the bottom, hang down scrotum AI style magazines pioneered by Badger and AI and others. But the problem is that you can't get them huntable. You can't get them so that you can carry the gun around. Instead, they all have some sort of a scrotum hanging down. And the shortest ones, the best ones, the greatest and the latest ones only hang down as much as a 1/4 inch. They're almost flush. There's 2 or 3 people making them. I'm really happy and that's great and blah, 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 blah. But unfortunately, the problem is they're cast. They don't have these adjustable feed lips. So we're stuck. We're in the middle of this whole quandary here. Very few stocks are capable of taking the forces generated by a big cartridge without this area flexing like crazy. This happens to have an aluminum block inside of it, and I've tested these, and they maintain stiffness through here. You'll notice it's very thick, very wide. A lot of the competitive stocks out there are just thin through this area, so I end up gluing a chassis assembly, taking one of the AI style mags with a tall, firm box and forevermore gluing it up in there, only to stiffen this area right here. This stock, for a 30 caliber Magnum, I feel is strong enough that we can do a conventional magazine box, getting back our good feed lips, not have a big tactical hang down here that gets in the way and falls out in the woods and is just ultimately retarded. I have so many complaints with tactical stuff and with our military versions. This is a hunting gun. This might look like it's got a few big adjustments, it's got a wide beaver tails, but this is a hunting rifle, people. You can carry this with one hand and rip down a shale slope and have another hand to put down for when you fall and roll and twist, and you can protect your gun. Bones heal, guns don't. So when you're skipping down a rock shale slide and it's your rib or your gun, this allows you to hold on with one hand and stabilize with the other hand as much as you can and save your precious firearm, because that's what you're there for. You can hunt with a busted rib, for crying out loud. But that aside, we've chosen the largest magazine box we can find and the adjustable feed lips and the stock that will accept it. These parts are carefully picked. So now that we're going to fit it, we're going to do something called mocking it up, such that we can put this in here, bolt this piece onto it, and start cycling rounds through this for form and fit and feed and function. We can play with followers, the magazine follower, which is right here, but we can fit this magazine box, cut it down to the size that we want. So we're going to start with that, and I'm not going to go through that because that's endless time out on the belt sander. I might go and mill this. I might drop this in the mill, take some measurements, drop it in the mill and mill it. I'm not sure yet. But we need to achieve a parallel with this surface. This is how it sits in the stock. This is how it's designed with its, you can buy a Wyatt magazine box, you can use a Remington magazine box, there's all kinds of things, but I am choosing to start with this Weatherby box. And to do that, we have to fit it to our assembly. And to do that, I don't want to put it in and out and in and out and in and out of the stock and beat the stock up, which I'm trying to be very careful with. Instead, we'll do this mock-up assembly and we'll cut this down. I'll mark it and I'll cut it down and I'll sway and I'll get it until it's bearing down on here so that that doesn't spin and that doesn't spin. Then I'll take a little more off so that it actually tightens up in here. We don't want this box to be binding. We don't want it to have a few thousandths gap here and a few thousandths gap here when it's in the stock, and that this in fact be bottomed out in here. No, we want the few thousandths of clearance to be inside this area, so that from point A to point B, this whole magazine box floats in here. We don't want any weird tensions in here, bending that action over the hump. So, these are just some of the things that we're considering as we get set to mock this thing up and run these dummy rounds through it. I'll even have a barrel stub that I'll screw in and I'll make sure that this thing runs well. Then, of course, we'll bolt it into here. And we'll make sure it runs well here. But I just wanted to, these are preliminary things as I'm building this. And the one thing that I guess I worry about a little bit is that when I get this mag fitted for whatever reason, but it's maximum width, it's maximum length, I'm reasonably sure. I might have to play with, I might have to put a flat follower on here, for instance. This just happens to be one that was on it. I don't know what it is. But I have piles of these, piles of these, piles of these. And we'll play with it till we get the fit and feed the way we want. And I need to do that right now because I pulled the trigger on this Reamer yesterday. And if we find out that this big old long magazine box doesn't work and we want to shorten it, I might want to shorten the free bore. So I might be calling the Kiffmeister here in the next day or two and saying, hey guys, could we take that free bore from about 200 thousandths long, bring it back to 150 thou? I would probably block the magazine before I did that. There's plenty of other things that I can do to make that work. But I did want to get this thing on the road, so I ordered the Reamer maybe a little quicker than I should have. So that's all I'm saying. I want to throw that out there that this could go sideways based on that particular thing. And if it does, we will approach it in such a way that there will be no long-term ill effects. I've got a week or two that I can change that free bore if I decide to. But I don't really see any reason that I would have to. And as I said, there are things I can do to modify it. I can glue a piece of something on the back of this magazine box to shorten it up just a wee bit, as opposed to going to another magazine box. So this goes back to our first thing. We're taking a 338 cartridge case for starters to make this 300, and we're using the 338 cartridge case specifically so that we can make this shouldering assembly here, specifically so that we can blow these thing out and maximize it. Balls to the wall is going to be our mantra with this bad boy. We're going to take this cartridge case and bring it hard as it can hard, and in the end, I think we'll be able to honestly say that we have maximized what is arguably the best 30 caliber cartridge case on the planet. We shall see.